Hey everyone, my name's Kieran Hicks, and I'm a lecturer at the University of Lincoln, where I teach on the Games Computing program. I teach across a variety of different modules, from introduction to games development to more advanced topics like procedural content generation. And so I'm here today talking to you to kind of highlight some of the different career prospects that would be open to you if you were to pick a games development focused degree at university. There we go. And so if you were, to pick a games computing style degree at university, the first thing you'd find when you graduate is that you're presented with a massive job market. Right this second, as I'm recording this video at least, there's just over 9,500 games industry jobs that are currently vacant, and hiring in the UK alone. And obviously there's much more across the entire globe, as the games industry is the biggest media industry we have, and there's studios in every country. And so if you were kind of, looking for jobs, one of the most typical pathways we see students, follow is going into the games industry in general, right? And so the games industry is absolutely massive. And one of the things you'll find is that there's tons of different roles depending on what your kind of skill sets are and what you actually enjoy doing. So if you see yourself, as a programmer, or you find that when you're programming, that's the bit you like, there is a ton of different programmer roles. And so how that can manifest is, you could be such roles such as a gameplay programmer. And so a gameplay programmer deals with how, the player actually interacts with the game world. So, how that jump mechanic feels when you press it, how that jump features and how it functions. But then there's other types of programmer roles. There's kind of low-level engine programming. So that's where you deal more with the graphics of the game and, basically the visual appearance and aesthetic. And so again, that can manifest, with really specific kind of jobs. And so, for example, I know one of our students ended up working on Sea of Thieves for a while. And in that, in his role there, he was responsible on working in a team, at least, on the waves, basically, in that game. And so, sometimes there's very specific roles in the industry. But again, it lets you kind of focus in on something you really want to do. Another kind of pathway that you can take is the design. And again, design comes in many different forms when we think of the games industry. And so there's the really overarching kind of, games design as a whole. So, managing the entire design space of a game, typically done at a more senior level. And normally as a kind of graduate, you go into what we kind of call like a junior design role. And so in that kind of aspect, you might be responsible for the design of smaller aspects. So maybe in an open world game, you might be responsible for the quest design, or maybe for how some of the world actually looks. And so that can fall into what we call like the level design kind of job space, where, your goal or your job is basically to build those levels using the art assets that artists have made to actually make them a playable and fun experience. But it gets a bit more complex than that in the industry. Now that it's so big, what's happened is we now actually have incredibly specialized roles. And so with the kind of popularity of things like cloud-based computing, there's now roles in the games industry that try and leverage, using cloud-based computing to help develop games. And so the game in the background here is actually the latest Microsoft Flight Simulator that uses a bunch of different cloud technologies to generate most of the game content, most of the game world, and to allow you to actually fly around the globe in a realistic manner. And again, that's a really, that's a specialized role, but that's something that is open to you as a games development graduate. You'll have a kind of computer science background, so you understand programming, and you can then specialize if you like that aspect of like pushing technology forward. Then that's a pathway that's available to you. Another pathway that can emerge, and again, it's something we see actually quite a lot of students follow, is indie development. So again, potentially, starting up your own company and dealing with the running of and producing of a games company is actually a really exciting challenge. And also lets you kind of create the experiences that you want to create. And again, it's something that's definitely available and more doable now than ever before, with how easy it is to access storefronts to actually sell your games. But I'd also like to point out, a games degree doesn't just limit you to working in the games industry, and actually the skill sets that you pick up can be useful beyond games. And so one of those, again, if you do a games degree that focuses on the programming side of things, then that will give you a strong programmer skill set, right? And that can be used in any kind of software development industry that you are interested in. Then there's also things like in the slide here, you can see I've got a little excerpt from The Mandalorian. And so that's obviously a TV production, but they now use game engines to handle lots of the different scene generation. And so in that example, you can find a job working using your game engine knowledge that you gained from your degree, but in a different context that isn't for a playable experience. And that's something that's really interesting. And again, something that's opening up more and more every year as that becomes more popular. And so, that's some of the different things that might be available to you. There's a wealth more. As I said, there's some really specialized roles that exist in the industry. That's a good summary, I think, and hopefully kind of gets you thinking of maybe the things you might consider doing, if you were to study games. And what I want to mention is, what it actually looks like studying games, right? If you do a games computing style degree, how does that manifest itself at university? And so typically, in these degrees, they will normally teach you kind of different game engines. So that could be Unity or Unreal, or things like Godot, or like the more like independent ones. And then they're going to normally try and give you a solid grounding of programming fundamentals and programming languages. So, you'll come out of your degree knowing how to program, but also knowing how to use these engines to make game experiences. And that's the key thing there. So that's it for this kind of short summary of the different pathways that might be available to you. Hopefully you found that useful. And yeah, good luck if you do end up studying games.